When I stood in my own doorway and heard my husband's voice through our bedroom door saying those words to my best friend, I knew my 28-year marriage was over. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't supposed to be home. They thought I was 3 states away, burying my mother. They thought they were safe. They thought they could do whatever they wanted in my house, in my bed, while I grieved. They were wrong about so many things. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how I got to that moment. How a 62-year-old woman who had spent nearly 3 decades being the perfect wife, the loyal friend, the generous soul everyone could count on, ended up standing in her own hallway like a stranger in her own home, listening to her entire life crumble behind a closed door. My name is Margaret Ann Foster, and for most of my adult life, I thought I knew exactly who I was. I was David Foster's wife. I was the woman who kept our home running smoothly, who raised our 2 sons practically by myself while David built his accounting firm. I was the friend everyone called when they needed help, advice, or just someone to listen. I was reliable Margaret, steady Margaret, good old Margaret who never complained and never caused trouble. I met David when I was 34 years old. I know that's later than most people get married, but I had spent my 20s and early 30s caring for my father after he had a stroke. By the time he passed, most of my friends were already married with children, and I had convinced myself that my chance had passed. Then I met David at a community fundraiser. He was 41, divorced, with a successful business and a warm smile that made me feel like maybe it wasn't too late for me after all. We married 6 months later. It felt like a fairy tale, honestly. David had 2 young sons from his first marriage, ages 7 and 9, and I threw myself into being their stepmother. Their biological mother had moved to California and rarely visited, so I became the one who packed their lunches, went to their soccer games, helped with homework, sat up with them when they were sick. I loved those boys like they were my own. I gave them everything I had. David's business was demanding, requiring long hours and frequent travel. I understood. I supported him. I made sure he never had to worry about anything at home. The house was always clean, meals were always ready, his clothes were always pressed. When he was stressed, I listened. When he was tired, I took care of everything so he could rest. I thought I was being a good wife. I thought that's what marriage was supposed to be. And then there was Diane. Oh, Diane. I met her 12 years ago at a book club meeting. She had just moved to town after her divorce, didn't know anyone, and looked so lost sitting alone in the corner. I invited her to join our discussion group, and we clicked immediately. She was funny, sophisticated, had traveled the world, and she made me feel interesting just by being interested in me. Within months, she had become my closest friend, the sister I never had. Diane was over at our house constantly. She joined us for holidays, family dinners, birthdays. David liked her too, said she was good for me, that I needed more friends who got me out of the house occasionally. The 3 of us would sometimes go to restaurants together or to the movies when David had a rare free evening. It felt comfortable, safe, like family. I helped Diane through rough patches. When she lost her job 3 years ago, I lent her money, $3,200 to be exact, to cover her rent until she found something new. She paid me back eventually, but in small amounts, and honestly, I told her not to worry about it. What's money between friends? When she had health issues and no insurance, I helped her find affordable doctors and even covered some of her medication costs, another $800 or so. When her car broke down, David and I co-signed a loan for her because her credit was damaged from her divorce. We were happy to help. Looking back now, I can see things I didn't see then. Little moments that should have raised red flags, but I was too trusting, too naive, too willing to see the best in everyone. The way Diane would sometimes touch David's arm when she laughed at his jokes, how she started dressing differently when she knew she'd see him, more makeup, tighter clothes, higher heels. The way she'd ask about his schedule, when he'd be home, when he'd be traveling. I remember one evening about a year ago, I came home from grocery shopping and found them sitting very close together on the couch, their heads bent over David's laptop. They jumped apart when I walked in, and Diane said they were just looking at vacation photos from David's recent business trip to Miami. I felt something then, just a tiny flutter of unease in my stomach, but I pushed it away. I told myself I was being paranoid. These were the two people I trusted most in the world. How could I even think such a thing? There were other signs. David became more distant over the past year. He started working even later than usual, coming home after I was already in bed. He'd shower immediately when he got home, which was new. He bought new cologne, started going to the gym regularly, bought tighter shirts. When I mentioned he seemed different, he said he was just trying to take better care of himself as he approached 60. He said he wanted to be healthy for our retirement years together. What a load of garbage that turned out to be. Diane started canceling plans with me more often. She was busy, she said. She had met someone new, she said, but she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. She wanted to make sure it was serious first. I was happy for her. I encouraged her to take her time, to protect her heart. God, I was such a fool. The phone calls between them increased too. I didn't realize it at first, but David's phone was always buzzing with texts. When I'd ask who it was, he'd say it was work, or one of the boys, or his brother. His phone suddenly had a password on it, which it never had before. When I asked about that, he got defensive, said he needed it for security because he had client information on there. It made sense. Everything made sense because I wanted it to make sense. About 6 months ago, I started feeling like a ghost in my own home. David barely looked at me anymore. He'd come home, grab dinner, and disappear into his office for hours. On weekends, he was always busy with something. Golf with clients, emergency meetings, conferences. We hadn't been intimate in nearly 8 months, and when I tried to initiate, he'd say he was too tired, too stressed, or he'd already be asleep before I even got into bed. I felt invisible, unwanted, old. At 62, I started wondering if this was just what happened to marriages after nearly 3 decades. Maybe the passion faded. Maybe this was normal. My mother's voice would echo in my head, telling me that marriage was work, that you stuck it out through the boring years, that not every season could be exciting. But it hurt. It hurt to live with someone who seemed to barely tolerate my presence. It hurt to put effort into my appearance, into cooking his favorite meals, into trying to connect with him only to be met with disinterest or irritation. I felt like I was disappearing, fading away into nothing while he got more vibrant, more alive, more engaged with everything except me. Diane noticed my sadness. Of course she did. She was the one causing it. She'd take me out for coffee and ask how things were with David. I'd confess that I felt distant from him, that something felt off, and she'd pat my hand and tell me that all marriages go through rough patches. She'd say that men get weird at this age, midlife crisis stuff, that I just needed to be patient. She was so understanding, so sympathetic. She'd hug me and tell me everything would be okay, and the whole time she was sleeping with my husband. Then my mother got sick. She lived in Arizona, and I hadn't seen her in about a year. We talked on the phone every Sunday, our standing appointment, but she was always independent, always insisting she was fine. When my cousin Rachel called me 3 weeks ago to say that Mom had been hospitalized with pneumonia, I immediately booked a flight for the next day. David seemed concerned, asked if I wanted him to come with me. I said no. He had that big audit coming up, and I'd probably be there at least a week or two, depending on Mom's recovery. He hugged me, told me to take care, to call him every day. He seemed like the old David for just a moment, caring and attentive. I held on to that hug a little longer than usual, desperate for connection. Diane came over that evening to say goodbye, bringing me a care package for the trip. Snacks, a book she thought I'd like, some nice lotion. She hugged me tight and told me she'd check on David while I was gone, make sure he was eating properly. I thanked her. I actually thanked her for offering to spend time with my husband while I went to care for my dying mother. I flew to Phoenix the next morning. Mom was in rough shape but stable. The doctors said she'd recover but needed close monitoring. I spent 3 days at the hospital, sleeping in the chair next to her bed, holding her hand, talking to her when she was awake. Rachel would come by in the evenings to give me breaks, and I'd go back to Mom's apartment to shower and try to sleep. On the 4th day, Mom took a turn for the better. The infection was responding to antibiotics, her breathing had improved, and the doctors said she'd likely be released to a rehabilitation facility within a few days. I was relieved, exhausted, and suddenly overwhelmed with homesickness. I wanted my own bed. I wanted my life back. Or what I thought was my life. That evening, I was at Mom's apartment when my cousin Rachel called. She sounded upset, said she needed to tell me something but wasn't sure if she should, given everything I was dealing with. My heart started pounding. I asked her what was wrong, thinking maybe something had happened to one of David's sons or to David himself. Rachel said that her friend Janet, who lived in my neighborhood, had mentioned seeing a strange car in my driveway almost every day since I'd been gone, a silver BMW. She thought it was odd because it would arrive in the late afternoon and stay until late at night. Rachel had looked up my home address on Google Maps and asked Janet to describe the car in person if she saw them again. Janet had texted Rachel that very afternoon. A woman with blonde hair, wearing expensive clothes, had arrived at 4 p.m. It was now 9 p.m. Arizona time, which meant 11 p.m. back home, and the car was still there. I felt my blood run cold. I knew exactly one person with a silver BMW, Diane. I told Rachel I had to go, and I immediately called David. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail again. I called 3 more times. Nothing. Then I tried texting, "David, pick up, emergency." No response. I waited 10 minutes, my hands shaking, my mind racing. Then I called Diane. Straight to voicemail, like her phone was off. I knew. In that moment, I knew. My body knew before my mind could fully process it. All those little signs, all those weird feelings, all those moments of unease I'd pushed away came flooding back. I sat on Mom's worn couch in her small apartment and felt my entire reality shift under me like an earthquake. I booked a flight home for the next morning, the earliest I could get. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell Diane. I called Rachel and told her what I was doing, asked her to keep checking on Mom and to not tell anyone I was coming home early. Then I called my son James, the younger one, who lived 2 hours away from us. I told him I needed his help with something and couldn't explain yet, but could he meet me at the house tomorrow afternoon? He heard the tone in my voice and said yes immediately. The flight felt endless. I sat in that middle seat, squeezed between strangers, my mind going in circles. Part of me was trying to find innocent explanations. Maybe Diane's car had broken down and she was borrowing one that looked like hers. Maybe David had told me about some project they were working on together and I'd forgotten. Maybe I was being crazy, paranoid, jumping to conclusions because I was stressed about my mother. Maybe pigs could fly. But deep down, I knew. The way you know things in your bones before your brain catches up. I thought about our entire marriage, all 28 years of it. Had it all been a lie? Had he ever really loved me? Was I just convenient, a housekeeper and cook who also warmed his bed occasionally? I thought about Diane, about every moment we'd shared, every secret I'd told her, every time I'd helped her. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? Had they laughed about me? Had they made plans for after I was gone, either divorced or dead? I had spent my entire adult life taking care of other people. My father, then David, then his sons, then everyone in my life who needed anything. I had made myself small, quiet, accommodating. I had erased my own needs and wants to make room for everyone else's. And this was what I got for it. Betrayal from the two people I had loved and trusted most in the world. I landed at noon. James picked me up at the airport. He's 35 now, a software engineer, divorced himself for the past 2 years. He took one look at my face and hugged me hard. In the car, I told him everything. I watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief to rage. He wanted to drive straight to the house immediately, wanted to confront David himself. I told him no. I told him I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know for absolute certain before I made any decisions, and I needed to do it my way. We stopped at a coffee shop a few blocks from my house. It was 1:30 p.m. I texted David, "Mom took a bad turn. I'll be staying at least another week. I'll call you tonight." I watched the typing bubbles appear. Then his response, "I'm so sorry, honey. Take care of her. Take care of you. Love you." I felt sick reading those words. James put his hand on my shoulder. Then I texted Diane, "Miss you, friend. This has been so hard. Thank you for looking after David for me. You're the best." Her response came quickly. "Anything for you, sweetie. Don't worry about anything here. Focus on your mom. Love you lots." I put my phone down on the table and looked at James. I said, "Let's go." We drove to the house. James parked his car down the street and I used my key to enter through the back door from the garage. The house was quiet. It was 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. David should have been at work, but his car was in the garage, parked right next to that silver BMW I knew so well. The kitchen was a mess, 2 wine glasses on the counter, one with lipstick on the rim, a pizza box on the table, my favorite throw blanket from the living room draped over a chair. They were comfortable here. They'd made themselves at home in my space. I could feel James vibrating with anger beside me. I put my finger to my lips and pointed upstairs. We climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt surreal, like I was in someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. I could hear music playing from our bedroom, something jazzy and sensual. My bedroom, my sanctuary. The room where I'd given birth to 2 miscarriages before David's vasectomy, where I'd cried myself to sleep more times than I could count this past year, where I'd spent countless nights alone while he worked late. The door was closed. I stood there with James beside me, my hand on the doorknob, and for just a moment I hesitated. Once I opened this door, there was no going back. My life as I knew it would be over. Even if by some miracle I was wrong, something had broken in me over the past 24 hours that couldn't be fixed. I opened the door. They didn't hear it at first. The music was too loud. I saw them before they saw me. My husband of 28 years naked in my bed with my best friend of 12 years. Her blonde hair spilled across my pillows. His hands on her body. Both of them completely lost in each other, completely unaware that their entire world was about to detonate. I stood there frozen. James grabbed my arm, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what my eyes were showing me. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of horrible dream. But it was real. The smell of perfume and sweat, the sound of their breathing, the sight of them together in my bed, in my space, in my life. Then Diane opened her eyes and saw me. The look on her face, I will never forget it. Shock, then terror, then something that almost looked like relief, like she was glad it was finally over, glad she didn't have to pretend anymore. She screamed, scrambled away from David, grabbing for the sheet. David turned and saw me. His face went completely white. He said my name like a question, like he couldn't believe I was real. "Margaret?" He grabbed for his boxers on the floor. "Margaret, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Arizona." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Of all the things he could have said, that's what came out of his mouth. Not an apology, not an explanation, just confusion that I had the audacity to come home to my own house at the wrong time and ruin their afternoon. James stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Dad, what the hell is wrong with you?" David's face changed when he saw James. Shame, finally. Some recognition that this was really happening, that he'd been caught. He pulled on his pants and stood up, his hands out like he was calming a wild animal. "James, son, this isn't what it looks like." "It isn't what it looks like? It isn't what it looks like? You're naked in our bed with my best friend while I'm supposed to be burying my mother, and it isn't what it looks like?" Diane was crying now, pulling on her clothes with shaking hands. "Maggie, please, I can explain. This just happened. We didn't mean for this to happen." "Just happened?" My voice broke. I walked further into the room. "This just happened? Your car has been here every day since I left. How stupid do you think I am? How long has this been going on?" They looked at each other. That look told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a relationship, a pattern, a betrayal that had been going on behind my back while I smiled and cooked them dinner and played the fool. David pulled on his pants. "Margaret, calm down. Let's talk about this like adults." Like adults? I felt something in me go very still, very cold. "How long, David?" "It doesn't matter," he started to say, but Diane interrupted. 2 years, she said quietly, not looking at me. "It's been 2 years, Maggie. I'm sorry." 2 years. 730 days of lying, of looking me in the eye and pretending, of taking my help, my money, my trust, my friendship, and laughing about it behind my back. Of my husband coming home from being with her and kissing me hello like nothing was wrong. Of holidays and birthdays and dinners where they both played their parts while I stayed oblivious and trusting. I trembled. "Get out," I said to Diane. "Get your things and get out of my house right now." She grabbed her purse and shoes, still crying. At the bedroom door, she turned back. "Maggie, I never meant to hurt you. I love him. We love each other. We tried to fight it, but sometimes you can't help who you fall for." I looked at her. This woman I considered family. This woman I helped and supported and trusted with everything. "You're dead to me. If I ever see you again, I will not be responsible for what I do." Something in my voice made her flinch. She ran. I heard her feet on the stairs, heard the front door slam, heard her car start and peel out of the driveway. Then it was just me, David, and James, in that bedroom that would never feel like mine again. David sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Margaret. God, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." "What way did you want me to find out?" I asked. "Were you planning to tell me at all? Or were you just going to keep screwing my best friend in my bed while I took care of everything else in your life?" "It wasn't like that," he said. "Then what was it like, David? Tell me. Make me understand how the man I've been married to for almost 30 years, the man I gave up everything for, the man I built my entire life around, could do this to me." "I gave you everything. Everything. I raised your children. I ran your house. I supported your career. I put your needs before mine every single day for 28 years. And this is what I get?" "You don't understand," he said, and I saw anger flicker across his face.
You've been so distant lately, so cold. We haven't been intimate in months. You barely talk to me anymore. I felt alone in my own marriage. I've been distant. I've been cold. You're the one who stopped touching me. You're the one who started coming home late every night. You're the one who acts like I'm invisible. Because you are invisible. He stood up, his own anger rising now. You're boring, Margaret. You've been boring for years. All you do is cook and clean and talk about the grocery list and what needs to be fixed around the house. When was the last time you had an interesting thought? When was the last time you wanted to try something new or go somewhere exciting? You've let yourself go. You've turned into this old, tired woman who I can barely stand to be around. James lunged at his father, but I grabbed his arm. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing exactly where David intended. My worst fears about myself, spoken out loud by the person who was supposed to love me most in the world. I see. So this is my fault. I drove you into her arms by being too boring, too old, too tired. That's not what I meant, David backtracked, seeing something in my face that scared him. Maggie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm upset. I'm not thinking clearly. No, I said. I think you're thinking more clearly than you have in a long time. You finally said what you really think about me. Thank you for that honesty. It changes things. What do you mean? He asked. Get out. What? Get out of this room. This is my room now. You can sleep in the guest room or the couch or your car or Diane's bed for all I care, but you are not sleeping here. Margaret, this is my house too. Get out. I screamed it, and both James and David jumped. Get out right now, or I swear to God I will burn everything you own and throw you out myself. David grabbed some clothes and left the room. I slammed the door behind him and locked it. Then I collapsed on the floor, my back against the bed I'd never sleep in again. And I sobbed. James sat beside me and held me while I cried harder than I'd ever cried in my life. Everything hurt. My chest, my head, my heart. It felt like something had broken inside me that could never be repaired. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and sharp. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. Not just at David and Diane, but at myself. At the woman I'd been, the doormat, the fool, the one who gave and gave and gave and never asked for anything back. The one who made herself small so everyone else could be big. I was done being that woman. I was done crying over people who didn't deserve my tears. I was done being the victim in my own life story. If David wanted a war, if he wanted to see what happened when boring, old, tired Margaret finally fought back, then that's exactly what he was going to get. I stayed in that bedroom for 3 hours. James sat with me for the first hour, then went downstairs to make sure David didn't leave or destroy anything. I could hear them arguing, David trying to explain himself, James telling him he was disgusted by him. Eventually, I called James back up and told him I was okay, that he should go home to his own family but stay by his phone. He made me promise to call him if I needed anything, then left reluctantly. I took a long shower, scrubbing myself until my skin was red, trying to wash away the feeling of contamination. Then I stripped the bed completely, sheets, pillows, everything, and threw it all in the hallway. I would burn it later. I called a locksmith and scheduled them to come first thing in the morning to change all the locks. Then I called my lawyer. Gary Bennett had handled our wills and some property transfers over the years. He was semi-retired but kept a small practice. His voicemail said he'd return calls within 24 hours. I left a message. Gary, this is Margaret Foster. I need to see you as soon as possible regarding a divorce. Please call me back tonight if you can. Then I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. I went through our bank accounts and credit card statements, printing out anything that looked suspicious. Charges at hotels, expensive restaurants, jewelry stores.
I found it charged for a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Vermont from 6 months ago when David had supposedly been at a conference in Boston. I found another at a spa resort when he'd said he was visiting his brother. I went through his dresser drawers, his closet, his office. In a box in the back of his closet, I found cards from Diane. Love letters. Explicit letters. My hands shook as I photographed every single one. In his desk, I found a burner phone I'd never seen before. It was locked, but the fact that it existed was damning enough. I took pictures of everything. Around 8 p.m., David knocked on the bedroom door. "Margaret, can we please talk?" "No," I said through the door. "I need clothes for work tomorrow." "You should have thought about that before you decided to fuck my best friend in our bed." Silence. Then, "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. We can talk when you've calmed down." "Perfect," I said. "Run to your mistress. That's what you're good at." I heard him walk away, heard the front door open and close, heard his car start, then silence. I was alone in the house for the first time since this nightmare began. I walked through every room, seeing it differently now. This wasn't my home. This was a stage set where I played a role for almost 3 decades. The devoted wife, the supportive partner, the invisible woman. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with my phone. I called my cousin Rachel in Arizona to check on Mom. She was continuing to improve and would be moved to rehab tomorrow. I told Rachel what had happened, and she gasped and cursed and told me she'd get on a plane right now if I needed her. I said no, stay with Mom, I had this handled, but I appreciated the offer more than she knew. Then I called my older stepson, Michael. He was 37, married with 2 kids, living about 4 hours away. He had always been closer to me than to David, had called me Mom since he was 10 years old. I told him what his father had done. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then, quietly, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. Do you need me to come there?" "Not yet," I said, "but I might need you to testify in court about what kind of father and husband he's been." "Whatever you need," Michael said immediately. "I'm on your side, 100%. That meant everything to me. Both of his sons, the boys I'd raised, were standing with me. That gave me strength. Gary Bennett called me back at 9:30 p.m. I explained the situation, told him what I'd found, told him I wanted David destroyed financially in the divorce. Gary listened carefully, asked pointed questions, then said, "Margaret, I've known you and David for 15 years. I never would have expected this from him. I'm going to refer you to my colleague Sharon Winters. She specializes in high-conflict divorces, and she's a barracuda. You want her on your side. I'll call her tonight and get you an appointment for tomorrow if possible." I thanked him profusely. He said, "Margaret, document everything. Every affair-related expense came from marital funds, which means he stole from you to fund his infidelity. Sharon will make him pay for every penny." I spent the rest of the night going through paperwork. I found our marriage certificate, our tax returns for the past 7 years, all our property deeds, retirement account statements, investment records. I made copies of everything and put the originals in a safety deposit box I opened years ago for my mother's jewelry. David didn't even know it existed. At midnight, my phone buzzed with texts from Diane. Dozens of them. Begging for forgiveness, saying they loved me and never meant to hurt me, saying they were a terrible person and understood if I never spoke to them again, but could I please understand that she and David had a connection neither of them could deny, saying they hadn't wanted to fall in love but couldn't help it, saying maybe eventually we could all find a way to be friends again because she valued our relationship too much to lose it. I read every single message. Then I blocked her number. But not before I screenshotted every text and added it to my evidence folder. David sent messages too, apologizing, saying he'd made a terrible mistake, saying he loved me and wanted to work things out, saying we could go to counseling, that we could fix this if I just gave him a chance, saying he'd broken off with Diana, would never see her again. Like I believe a word out of his lying mouth. I didn't respond to him either. I just saved the messages as evidence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket that didn't smell like betrayal. And I thought about my life. I thought about who I'd been before David, when I was young and full of dreams. I'd wanted to be a teacher. I'd been good at art. I'd loved to travel. Somewhere along the way, I'd given up all of that to become someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's servant. I'd erased myself. But I was still here, 62 years old, betrayed and broken, but still here, still breathing, still capable of fighting back. And that's exactly what I was going to do. Sharon Winters called me at 8 a.m. the next morning. She had a voice like gravel and steel, and I liked her immediately. She had an opening at 10 if I could come to her office. I said I'd be there. The locksmith arrived at 9. I had him change every lock on every door, including the garage. I took the only set of new keys. David could ring the doorbell like a guest if he wanted to come into the house he disrespected so thoroughly. Sharon's office was in a high-rise downtown. She was probably in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat me down, offered me coffee, and said, "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." I talked for 90 minutes straight. I showed her all my evidence, all the photos, all the financial records, all the text messages. She took notes, asked questions, and her expression got harder and harder. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and smiled like a shark. "Margaret, you've built an excellent case. We have proof of adultery, proof that he used marital funds to support the affair, proof that he's been lying to you for years. In this state, adultery is considered in property division and spousal support. We're going to take him to the cleaners." "Good," I said, coldly. "I want everything I'm entitled to and then some. I want him to regret the day he ever thought he could treat me like this." "That's the spirit," Sharon said. She outlined a strategy. We'd file for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences with adultery as a factor. We'd demand he move out of the marital home pending the divorce. We'd request temporary spousal support and exclusive use of all marital assets. We'd go for a 50-50 split of everything, plus compensation for his affair-related spending. And we'd make sure everyone knew exactly why the marriage ended. I signed the paperwork that afternoon. The divorce filing would be submitted to the court by end of day. David would be served with papers within 48 hours. Sharon told me to expect him to fight back, to try to negotiate, to make promises. She told me not to communicate with him except through her. She told me to stay strong. When I got home, David was sitting on the front steps. He stood up when he saw me, looking haggard and exhausted. "Margaret, please, we need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," I said, walking past him to the front door. "The locks are changed," he said. "I can't get in." "I know," I replied, coldly. "This is my house too. You can't lock me out of my own house." I turned to face him. "Yes, I can. And I did. You'll be served with divorce papers in the next day or two. My lawyer will be in touch. Until then, stay away from me and stay away from this house." "You can't do this." His voice rose. Panicked now. "Margaret, be reasonable. This is half my house. My business records are in there, my clothes, my things." "Should have thought about that before you brought your whore into my bed," I said, my voice flat and emotionless. Pause. "You told me I was boring, old, tired, that you could barely stand to be around me. Well, now you don't have to be around me anymore. Congratulations, you're free." I went inside and locked the door behind me. I watched through the window as he stood there for another 10 minutes, then finally got in his car and drove away. Only then did I let myself shake. Only then did I let the tears come again. But they were different tears now. Angry tears. Determined tears. Over the next week, things moved quickly. David was served with divorce papers at his office. According to Sharon, he'd broken down crying in front of the process server and his receptionist. He tried calling me 67 times that day. I didn't answer once. He sent emails, texts, left voicemails begging me to reconsider. His lawyer contacted Sharon trying to negotiate, but I'd given her clear instructions. No negotiation. We go to court and we take everything we can get. David tried showing up at the house twice more. The second time, I called the police. They didn't arrest him, but they told him he couldn't keep harassing me or he'd face consequences. After that, he stayed away. The news spread through our social circle like wildfire. I didn't hide what happened. When friends called asking if the rumors were true, I told them everything. Yes, David had an affair with Diane for 2 years. Yes, I caught them in my bed. Yes, we were getting divorced. The support I received was overwhelming. Meals delivered to my door, offers to help with anything I needed, messages of outrage on my behalf. Everyone, it seemed, was on my side. Diane tried to reach out through mutual friends. She wanted to explain herself, wanted closure, wanted me to know that she still cared about me despite everything. I told every single person who passed along these messages the same thing. Tell her if she contacts me or anyone I know again, I'll get a restraining order. David's business started suffering. Word got around about what he'd done, and several of his longtime clients dropped him. In our community, reputation mattered, and his was destroyed. His lawyer tried to claim that my public campaign against him was affecting his ability to earn income, which would hurt me in the divorce settlement. Sharon laughed in their faces and said if he'd wanted to protect his reputation, he shouldn't have committed adultery. James and Michael rallied around me completely. They both called David and told him exactly what they thought of him. Michael refused to let David see his grandchildren, saying he didn't want that kind of role model around his kids. James told David he was dead to him. The betrayal of both his sons hit David hard, I heard through the grapevine. He'd expected them to stay neutral or eventually forgive him. He hadn't counted on them choosing me. My mother recovered and moved from rehab to an assisted living facility near Rachel. I flew back to Arizona for a week to help her get settled. I told her everything that had happened, and she cried for me, but also said, "Good. Good that you're standing up for yourself. I always thought you let that man walk all over you. Divorce him. Take everything. Start over. You're still young enough to have a whole new life." She was right. 62 wasn't old. I had years ahead of me. Years I could spend being myself instead of being David's wife. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. When I returned home, I started making changes. I redecorated the bedroom completely. New paint, new furniture, new everything. I joined a gym and started working out 3 times a week. I got a new hairstyle, bought new clothes that actually fit my personality instead of what I thought a wife should wear. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. I was rediscovering who Margaret was, separate from anyone else. About 6 weeks after D-Day, as I'd come to think of it, Sharon called with an update. David's lawyer had submitted a settlement offer. He wanted to keep the house, give me half the value in cash. He wanted to split retirement accounts 50-50. He wanted to pay minimal spousal support for only 5 years, claiming that I could get a job since I was still young and capable. I laughed when Sharon read it to me. "Tell him to go to hell. We're going to trial." That's what I hoped you'd say. Because I've been digging Margaret, and I found some very interesting things. It turned out David had been hiding money. He'd opened a separate account 3 years ago that wasn't on any of our financial disclosures. He'd been funneling money from the business into it, probably planning for his eventual escape from our marriage. Sharon had found it through subpoenaed business records. There was $127,000 in that account. "That's marital property he hid from you," Sharon explained. "That's fraud. The judge is going to crucify him for this. We're also going to trace every penny he spent on Diane. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, that trip to Vermont, all of it came from marital funds. He stole from you to wine and dine his mistress. In this state, that's considered dissipation of marital assets. He'll have to pay you back every cent. Plus, it'll affect the property division in your favor." We calculated that David had spent approximately $43,000 on his affair over 2 years. $43,000 of our money, money we'd saved together, money that should have been for our retirement or helping our kids or taking trips together. He'd spent it on another woman. He'd valued his affair more than our entire marriage. The discovery process was brutal. Both sides had to turn over financial records, emails, text messages, everything. I had to sit for a deposition where David's lawyer tried to make me look like a bad wife, like I'd driven him to cheat through neglect and coldness. Sharon had prepared me, so I stayed calm and told the truth. Yes, our intimacy had declined because he'd started rejecting me. Yes, I'd been quieter lately because he'd made me feel unwanted and invisible. No, I'd never suspected an affair because I trusted him completely. When David's turn was to be deposed, I attended. Sharon said I didn't have to, but I wanted to see him squirm. And he squirmed, he did. Coldly. He had to admit to the affair, had to confirm the timeline, had to acknowledge every lie he'd told, had to explain the hidden bank account, the secret spending, the betrayal of our marriage vows. His lawyer tried to make it seem like a midlife crisis, a mistake, something that happened because our marriage was already broken. Sharon destroyed that argument by showing that he'd been actively pursuing Diane, spending money on her, planning getaways with her, all while telling me he loved me and wanted to grow old with me.
The worst part, or maybe the best part, was when Sharon asked him about the things he'd said to me that day, the day I caught them. She had him repeat, on the record, that he'd called me boring, old, tired, and said he could barely stand to be around me. "Is that how you really felt about your wife?" Sharon asked. David looked at me across the conference table. I stared back at him without expression. "I was angry," he said quietly. "I said things I didn't mean." "But you did say them," Sharon pressed. "You said them to your wife of 28 years, moments after she caught you in bed with her best friend. Those words came from somewhere, didn't they?" Yes, I said them, but I didn't mean them the way they sounded." "How many other things did you say to Mrs. Foster over the years that you didn't mean the way they sounded?" Sharon asked. "How many lies, how many false I love yous? How many times did you tell her everything was fine when you were planning your next rendezvous with your mistress?" David's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The court reporter had recorded every word. The judge would read this transcript. Everyone would know exactly what kind of man David Foster was. During this time, I learned more about Diane's role in everything. Through subpoenaed phone records, we found out they'd been in contact hundreds of times throughout our friendship. Long phone calls late at night, thousands of text messages. They'd been careful to delete most of them, but the metadata remained. Sharon hired a forensic accountant who traced some of David's business expenses to purchases for Diane. A $2,400 necklace, an $1,800 weekend bag, $650 shoes. He'd bought her things he'd never bought me, using our money. The worst discovery was that they'd been together in our house dozens of times when I was out. Doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, volunteering at the library. They'd used my absence to have their affair in my space. Sharon found a security camera record from a neighbor's doorbell camera that showed Diane arriving at our house one afternoon while David's car was in the garage and mine wasn't. The timestamp was from a day I'd been helping my mother with a medical appointment, coordinating her care long distance. While I'd been being a good daughter, they'd been desecrating my home. I cried when Sharon showed me that video. Not sad tears anymore, rage tears. How dare they? How dare they take my life, my trust, my love, and twist it into something so ugly? How dare they make me feel like I was the problem when they were the ones who lied and schemed and betrayed every secret thing? "We're going to bury him," Sharon said, her voice fierce. "I promise you, Margaret, we're going to make sure he regrets every single choice he made." The trial was set for 4 months after I'd filed. As the date approached, David got more desperate. He increased his settlement offers. He'd give me the house. He'd give me 60% of the retirement accounts. He'd pay spousal support for 10 years.
He just didn't want to go to trial, didn't want everything aired in public court where anyone could attend, where journalists sometimes showed up for juicy divorce cases. Tell him no, I told Sharon every single time. I want my day in court. I want everyone to know what he did. I wasn't being vindictive. Well, maybe I was a little, but mostly I wanted justice. I wanted David to face real consequences for his actions. I wanted it on the public record that he'd been a cheating, lying, stealing husband so that if he ever tried to rewrite history, the truth would be there in black and white. A week before the trial, Diane showed up at my house. I was in the garden, planting some new flowers, trying to reclaim every space that they'd contaminated with their presence. I heard the gate open and looked up to see her standing there, looking thin and haggard, dark circles under her eyes. "Get off my property," I said, standing up. "Maggie, please, I need to talk to you. I can't live with this guilt anymore. I need you to know how sorry I am." "Sorry?" I laughed, a harsh sound that made her flinch. "You're sorry? You're sorry that you slept with my husband for 2 years? You're sorry that you came to my home, ate my food, accepted my help, took my money, all while screwing my husband behind my back? Which part are you sorry about, Diane? Getting caught?" "I'm sorry for all of it." She was crying now, mascara running down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. You're my best friend. But I love him too, and I couldn't help myself. We tried to stop so many times, but the connection was too strong." "You're not my friend. A friend wouldn't do what you did. A friend wouldn't betray someone who helped her, supported her, trusted her. You're a user and a liar and a homewrecker, and I hope you're miserable for the rest of your life." "We're getting married," she blurted out. "After the divorce is final. David proposed last week. I wanted you to hear it from me before you found out some other way." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known this was probably coming. They were going to get married. They were going to build a life together on the ashes of my marriage. She had won in a way. She'd taken my husband, destroyed my life, and gotten her happy ending. But then I looked at her, really looked at her. She didn't look happy. She looked haunted, guilty, miserable. And I realized something. She hadn't won anything. She'd won a man who was capable of betraying his wife of 28 years, a man who'd lied to everyone he claimed to love, a man who'd proven that when things got tough or boring, he'd look for excitement somewhere else. How long before he did the same thing to her? How long before she became boring, old, tired in his eyes? "I hope you'll be very happy together," I said, and I meant it. "I hope you get exactly what you deserve, both of you." She stared at me, confused by my tone. "You mean that?" "I do," I said. "Because what you deserve is a life with a man who can't be trusted, a man who'll always have one eye on the next woman, a man who'll make you feel worthless when the shine wears off. You think you won, Diane? You didn't win. You just took my trash off my hands. So thank you for that." I turned back to my gardening, dismissing her. After a moment, I heard her walk away, the gate closing behind her. I stayed there in the dirt, my hands shaking, but I felt strangely lighter. I had meant what I said. They deserved each other. The trial lasted 3 days. The courtroom wasn't packed, but there were enough people there that I felt validated in my decision to go forward publicly. Some of our friends attended in support of me. David's brother came to support him, but ended up looking increasingly disgusted as the evidence was presented. Sharon was magnificent. She presented every piece of evidence methodically, building an undeniable case of adultery, fraud, and financial misconduct. The hidden bank account, the affair-related spending, the lies, the betrayal. She had me on the stand first, and I told my story simply and honestly. I talked about our marriage, about the work I'd put in, about the sacrifices I'd made. I talked about my trust in David and Diane, about how completely they'd deceived me. I cried on the stand when I described finding them in our bed, and I saw several people in the courtroom wipe their own eyes. David's lawyer tried to paint me as a neglectful wife during cross-examination. He asked about our sex life, trying to make it seem like I'd driven David away. Sharon objected repeatedly, and the judge sustained most of them, eventually telling David's lawyer to move on or be held in contempt. It didn't matter anyway. The evidence spoke for itself. When David testified, he tried to play the remorseful husband. He said he'd made terrible mistakes, that he'd never stopped loving me, that he wanted to make amends somehow. Sharon cross-examined him brutally, walking him through every lie, every secret, every dollar spent on his mistress. She had him read his own text messages to Diane out loud, including ones where he'd complained about me, called me names, laughed at things I'd said or done. Hearing those read aloud was devastating, but it was also freeing in a way. Any remaining doubt I had about whether I was doing the right thing evaporated. This wasn't the man I'd married. Or maybe it was, and I'd just never seen his true face until now. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Catherine Miller, didn't hide her disgust. When David's lawyer tried to argue that David shouldn't be financially penalized for the affair because these things happen in long marriages, Judge Miller cut him off. "Counselor, I'm not interested in excuses. Your client committed adultery, hid assets, and used marital funds to support his affair. Those are facts, not things that happen. Move on." On the third day, both sides gave closing arguments. David's lawyer painted him as a man who'd made mistakes, but was willing to make amends, who still cared for his wife and wanted to treat her fairly. Sharon painted the picture of a man who'd systematically betrayed, lied to, and stolen from his wife, who'd shown no remorse until he got caught, and who deserved to pay for every single transgression. The judge took less than an hour to deliberate. When she returned, I held James's hand on one side and Michael's on the other. Both my boys had come to support me, and their presence meant everything. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this case," Judge Miller began, looking directly at David, "and I find the behavior of the defendant to be reprehensible. Mr. Foster, you violated your marriage vows in the worst possible way. You lied to your wife repeatedly. You used marital assets to fund an affair while your wife believed you were building your retirement together. You hid money from her. And when confronted, you verbally abused her, blaming her for your own failings. This court does not look kindly on such behavior." She granted me the divorce, obviously, but the financial settlement was better than I'd even hoped for. I got the house, outright. David had to buy out my share of his business, which was valued at $840,000, giving me $420,000. The retirement accounts were split 60-40 in my favor due to his misconduct. He had to repay me the $43,000 he'd spent on the affair, plus the $127,000 from the hidden account. And he had to pay spousal support of $4,500 per month for 15 years, or until I remarried or died. The total financial penalty for his affair was over $600,000 when you calculated everything. David went white when the judge read the judgment. His lawyer asked for a reduction, claiming it would bankrupt his client. Judge Miller said coldly, "Perhaps Mr. Foster should have considered the cost before he chose to betray his wife. Judgment stands." I walked out of that courtroom with my head high. People congratulated me, hugged me, told me justice had been served. David sat in his seat, his head in his hands, his entire life falling apart around him. I felt no pity for him, only relief that it was finally over. The aftermath was both sweet and complicated. David had to sell some investments to pay me the immediate lump sums. His business took another hit when the judgment became public record and more clients left him. He couldn't afford to buy Diane the big engagement ring he'd apparently promised her, and I heard through the grapevine that they were fighting constantly about money now. Funny how a relationship built on betrayal and fantasy doesn't do so well when reality sets in. The house was truly mine now. I redecorated every room, erasing every trace of David, making it reflect who I was rather than who I'd been as his wife. I painted the walls bright colors, I hung my artwork, I bought furniture that I liked instead of what was practical. I created a studio space where I could paint every day. The house transformed from a museum of my old life into a celebration of my new one. With my settlement money, I set up trust funds for Michael's kids and James's future children. I donated to women's shelters and organizations that help people escape abusive relationships. I took a trip to Italy, something I'd always wanted to do but never could because David didn't like to travel for pleasure. I stood in Florence and looked at the art and cried happy tears because I was finally living for myself. I started attending a support group for women going through divorce. Hearing other stories, supporting other women being supported in return, it helped heal something in me. I made new friends, real friends who valued me for who I was. I started dating eventually, nothing serious, just rediscovering what it felt like to be wanted and appreciated. Men who opened doors for me, who listened when I talked, who thought I was interesting rather than boring. Turns out I wasn't the problem after all. James met someone wonderful, and I got to be there for their relationship without the shadow of David's judgment hanging over us. Michael's kids stayed close to me, calling me Grandma Maggie, coming to visit regularly. My boys remained firmly on my side, civil to their father when necessary, but never forgetting what he'd done to me. That loyalty meant more to me than any amount of money ever could. About a year after the divorce was final, I ran into Diane at the grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, harder, unhappy. She was with David, and they were arguing about something in hushed, angry voices. When she saw me, she went silent. David turned, saw me, and actually took a step toward me like he wanted to say something. I looked at them both, these two people who'd once been my whole world, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hurt, no nostalgia, nothing. They were strangers to me now, and bad ones at that. I smiled, nodded politely, and walked past them with my head high. I heard Diane say something to David, heard them start arguing again. I didn't look back. Why would I? My life was ahead of me, not behind me. People ask me sometimes if I regret not trying to save my marriage, if I wish I had gone to counseling with David, tried to work things out, forgiving the affair. My answer is always the same. No, not even a little bit. That marriage died the moment he betrayed me, and probably long before that if I'm being honest. I wasted 28 years being someone's support system instead of being my own person. I'm not wasting another day. The biggest lesson I learned from this whole nightmare is that you teach people how to treat you. I taught David that he could take me for granted because I never demanded better. I taught Diane that she could use me because I never set boundaries. I made myself so small, so accommodating, so willing to sacrifice my own needs that I disappeared even to myself. And that was nobody's fault but my own. But I also learned that it's never too late to change, never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to demand the respect and love you deserve. At 63 years old, I rebuilt my entire life from scratch, and it's better now than it ever was before. I have peace. I have freedom. I have myself back. To anyone listening to this who's in a situation like I was, who feels invisible or unappreciated or taken for granted, hear me when I say this. You deserve better. You deserve to be loved and valued and respected. And if the people in your life aren't giving you that, then they don't deserve you. It's terrifying to stand up for yourself, to blow up your life, to start over. But I promise you, on the other side of that fear is a life worth living. A life where you matter, a life where you're the main character instead of a supporting role in someone else's story. David tried to reach out a few times in that first year, sending emails, apologizing, saying he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, that he wanted me back. I deleted them without responding. Then I heard he and Diane broke up after about 18 months. Apparently, she'd caught him texting another woman. Imagine that. A cheater who kept cheating. Who could have predicted it? She called me crying, wanting sympathy, wanting me to understand that she knew how I felt now. I hung up on her. David eventually moved to another state. His business ruined, his reputation destroyed, his relationships with his sons barely functional. I heard he got remarried to someone much younger than him, and I felt sorry for her. She didn't know what she was in for, but that wasn't my problem anymore. My mother passed away peacefully 2 years after my divorce, with Rachel and me by her side. In her last days, she told me how proud she was of me for standing up for myself, for not being afraid to start over, for showing that it's never too late to choose yourself. Those words meant everything to me. Now, at 65 years old, I can honestly say I'm happier than I've ever been. I wake up every morning in my house, surrounded by beauty I created, with a day ahead of me that's entirely my own. I paint, I volunteer, I travel, I spend time with my grandchildren, I go out with friends, I do whatever brings me joy. And every single day, I'm grateful that I found the strength to walk away from a life that was killing me slowly. So yes, my daughter-in-law didn't throw away anything. That was a different story. My husband betrayed me with my best friend while I was supposed to be mourning my mother. What I caught them doing destroyed him in the end, but it saved me. And for that, strange as it sounds, I'm almost grateful, because that betrayal set me free. My name is Margaret Ann Foster. I'm 65 years old, and I finally know my own worth. If you liked my story, please leave a comment below about your own experiences. Have you ever had to start over? Have you ever caught someone you loved in a betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear from you. And remember, it's never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to demand better. Never too late to become who you were always meant to be. Thank you for listening.